In this, our second series, we welcome members of the Movement for Health Coalition to showcase the work achieved by Scotland's charity sector, supporting people with long-term health conditions to move, celebrate their movement, and evidence the need for more investment.
Hello and welcome to today's Movement in Conversation podcast. Today I'm joined by Amanda Mackay from Parkinson's UK. Amanda, hello and welcome.
Hi Emma, thanks for having me.
Hi. Good to see you. Parkinson's UK has been a founding member, if you like, one of the original members of the Movement for Health Coalition in Scotland, and already does excellent work within the physical activity and movement spaces for people living with Parkinson's. And Amanda is joining me today to talk about that in more detail. Thank you, Amanda. If we could start off then by talking a little bit about Parkinson's UK and the work of the organisation, please.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, so Parkinson's UK, we're actually a UK charity, so across the nations, we obviously have specific work that we take forward in Scotland, and I'm part of that team. But basically, the charity is here to support people living with Parkinson's and to support them all, throughout their journey with Parkinson's. There's a saying that we hear quite a lot working with people with Parkinson's. There's not two people the same. And if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. It's a very complex condition. Unfortunately, there isn't a cure. It's a progressive condition. And actually, it's the fastest growing neurological condition in the world. So we are really there to support people living with the condition who've recently been diagnosed, and to help support them throughout that process of living with Parkinson's, and also helping with funding research as well. Okay, we do want to see a cure. We need to understand why Parkinson's actually happens, which is something we don't really know at the moment. So a lot of our efforts and fundraising goes into to helping with research, but also making sure that people today living with the condition today are better supported to face Parkinson's and have a better quality of life. That's ultimately what our goal is.
I didn't appreciate it was the fastest growing neurological condition.
Yeah.
What are some of the symptoms that people might experience with Parkinson's? What might and what does Parkinson's look like in Scotland at the moment as well, at our population?
Yeah, so in Scotland we've got around 13,000 people living with Parkinson's, and obviously it has a huge impact on family, friends and carers as well. So, it's not a condition with, lots of people like your coronary heart disease and diabetes, but it really, I think that's probably part of the challenge, that people don't really understand it too well unless they have a family member or friend living with Parkinson's. So that's definitely a challenge within itself. In terms of the symptoms, so the main symptoms that you would recognise someone with Parkinson's, or usually how they tend to be diagnosed, are around a tremor. And that tremor's persistent at rest as well, so it's not something that goes away. Slowness of movement and rigidity in the body. So often you see people, they don't have an arm swing, for example. Not everyone has all three of those symptoms as well, so it is a very complex condition. And actually we kind of categorise our symptoms into motor and non-motor symptoms. So motor symptoms are things like how Parkinson's affects our balance, our gait, our ability to walk. People can have real problems with initiating movement and can have almost experience what we call freezing, where it's literally their feet feel frozen to the ground, and they're unable to move, which can cause a lot of anxiety, and also falls. So those are some of the kind of main motor symptoms. Then we also have non-motor symptoms, and actually overall there's around 40 different symptoms for people with Parkinson's. So to go back to that, you've met one person with Parkinson's. Not everyone is the same and experiences at the same level or even the same number of symptoms. So yeah, going back to kind of non-motor symptoms, sort of fatigue, pain, thinking about bowel movements, constipation, but also anxiety, depression, apathy. There's obviously problems with communication and speech as well is a big one for people with Parkinson's. So there's many. There really is a lot to contend with.
And as you say, quite very wide ranging there, and presenting very differently from individual from individual to individual. And so what is your role within Parkinson's UK, Amanda?
Yeah. So my role is delivery manager. So my remit is for Scotland. So we're quite niche in Scotland in that we were able to, we had some initial money from the lottery, which helped us really kind of drive this programme forward. And now it's we've got a physical activity strategy within the whole organisation. And that's allowed us to kind of fit this role within that programme. So yeah, it's really recognised both by the charity, but certainly by people with Parkinson's, that physical activity is a key part of the management of Parkinson's. And I think that's probably one of the key kind of drivers of this organisation, is that, you know, it is people led. You know, people tell us what they want and need, and we look to support them to make sure that we can deliver that. And whether it's, you know, the research or the advice, the information, the support on the ground, you know, we're being led by people with Parkinson's, and that's really key. So in terms of our physical activity programme, it then, you know, transfers into what people are looking for in terms of physical activity and where that need is as well.
And what are people looking for? So what are people asking for? What are people finding works? As you say, it presents so differently with everyone. So I'm imagining people's movements are very varied and preferences are very varied, and they're for themselves as people, but also depending on what their symptoms might be or how it's presenting for them. So tell us a little bit more about that offering.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people who feed into the programme will probably read up on Parkinson's. Not everyone, but a lot of people, if they go on to the internet, they'll be looking at what research is around. Unfortunately, there isn't one activity that you can say, you know, like you've just described. People have all sorts of symptoms, so there isn't one magic thing that you can do. And I think in that, you know, ingredient list, if you like, you know, we're all individuals and we all like certain things. So, you know, it's an additional challenge to find something that people want to do regularly. But yeah, I guess the key is, you know, we want to be making sure that, you know, 150 minutes of physical activity per week. We want to be making sure that there's definitely some strength training in there. So 2 days a week. We need to be making sure we're working on people's balance, encouraging them to challenge themselves, as well as kind of more specific things around Parkinson's, around coordination, voice exercise. So yeah, go back to coordination, sort of multitasking activities as well. But also flexibility and mobility are really key areas for people with Parkinson's. So yeah, anything that we create or develop, we need to be thinking about those elements within it. But then you go back to it needs to be fun, and not everyone wants to go to a gym or an exercise class. So how do we, you know, accommodate that within programmes? And that's really what we've kind of tried to look at with this work is, you know, can we understanding what the challenges people face, you know, and strengths are really key one to this actually, because there's research now showing us that vitamin D levels really plummet with Parkinson's, and that obviously has a huge risk for you're at a risk of a fall, and how you recover from that, and if you have a break. So making sure that, you know, programmes really do challenge strength as a preventative measure for, you know, future falls, for example. So those are the types of things that we want to make sure are embedded in programmes. But I think ultimately it comes down to what people want to do that are fun.
It's getting that balance, isn't there? Talking about balance, but that balance between what's fun, what's accessible, and what works for me and my symptoms. I'm wondering then if we can touch upon the programmes themselves, and is this something that does your organisation create and offer these programmes, or do you work with leisure trusts, etc., who are already in communities, and do you offer training and support for their workforce? What does it look like?
Yeah. So we've got a couple of different models. So at the moment, I guess our main focus initially was to look at the leisure trust sector and what they provide. I think ultimately anything that we develop needs to be sustainable, and that's the challenge.
Correct.
It's making
Yeah.
sure that these programs are the norm. And a lot of the leisure trusts, will have had instructors who've got some experience or some other training around Parkinson's, but it wasn't really the norm, and they tended to have very few people with Parkinson accessing those services. And some of that might have been around communication and linking with health professionals and that kind of two-way process of them really understanding what the patient or the client would get when we get to an exercise program. So we've really kind of tried to develop some training, exactly how you described that actually, for leisure providers and exercise instructors, to really understand what those challenges are, what are the symptoms that people face, what does the condition look like for people with Parkinson's. And it's okay, we can say, we can tackle strength and balance, and we can get people, getting out of breath, hot and sweaty, and we can do all those things, but ultimately we need to get them over the front door. And when you're faced with such anxiety and motivation that you can't control fatigue, you haven't slept for a few days or limited hours at a time, that can be a real challenge for people. So helping those trusts to understand some of those challenges, and then working with them really closely. As I said, there's 13,000 people in Scotland. It's not a huge amount of people, but there are pockets where there are more people. So what can we offer in an area that is going to be sustainable? So is it something that we consider as Parkinson's friendly? So it may not be the full works of a session only for people with Parkinson's, but it will provide elements of support within that. Or do we look at, we know that we've got, a kind of larger cohort of people that we can engage, and can we do something specific? But I guess the key is always making sure that, that it's always that, it does all come down to money and capacity, unfortunately. So how do we make sure that these services are available and that, they can continue without, ongoing support? So yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
It really is. You've mentioned, Amanda, their communications, working on communications and getting people over the threshold. It can be that first hurdle, getting them over that first hurdle, if you like, knowing it's for them and that it's a safe space for them. What about other types of barriers then, in terms of, I had a conversation this morning on another podcast recording about rurality and access, like physical access to things. And I'm assuming, making some assumptions here, just as you've described so eloquently about some of the experiences people might be living with their Parkinson's, the feeling of isolation, of frustration, anxiety, I'm assuming a big impact on people's mental health on a lot of bases as well. So just let's talk about those barriers that you guys consider when looking at working in specific areas.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an example, I went along to one of the walking football sessions that we set up with Glasgow Life and Celtic, who have supported that session as well. And one of the gentlemen there has said to me, until I had came to this session, I'd never met another person with Parkinson's. And, he just described how he had buried his head in the sand. He'd been diagnosed about 2 years before that and really just didn't know what to do. But I think what was quite interesting was, and maybe, west of Scotland, males, football, that was the thing. That was the thing for him. And if that hadn't happened, where would he be now? Because, that activity has not only introduced him to walking football and something that he can do on a weekly basis, hopefully soon twice a week, but it's also introduced him to a really good social support network who have opened other doors around physical activity. So some of the members or some of the players who went along were doing table tennis, or they would go to a Pilates class or a yoga, and it's that support that we just can't give that to people. Like, it's so important to be able to engage with others, and he would have never thought that was going to be the outcome of that. Similarly with, I went along to a table tennis session, so we've been doing some work with Walking Football Scotland and Table Tennis Scotland to try and, make sure that these sports are available and accessible to people with Parkinson's. Again, doing some similar awareness training and just helping them be more accessible to people. But going along to a table tennis session and hearing from a carer, again, who'd never met other carers of people with Parkinson's, and the support that then gave her, not just at the group, but it extended, and they became, really good friends. And the doors opened again to other activities.
It's that ripple effect. It's that ripple effect that we talk about, isn't it? When you've done that initial work, you've made that safe, informed, accessible space for people to meet, and then the growth of that isn't necessarily needs us anymore necessarily either. It organically can grow, and especially with a condition that is a bit more rare, in terms of it's less common than other long-term conditions, where isolation and, as you say, maybe never having met someone before. I think obviously that 13,000 number though, and you're saying that it is the fastest growing neurological condition. Obviously we're living a lot longer as well, and so I do feel that number will change. But it's wonderful to hear how that natural connectedness can organically grow from a charity's project, essentially. And I think Walking Football has such a great culture around it as well. I think it has met a real need within males in society, especially, I would say, as a space that feels like it's for them to connect in as well. I think is so important. And sports venues, arenas and sports clubs and societies, we know, play a hugely important part of our culture and our society and our heritage, etc. But there's lots of other forms of movement as well. And I was really lucky to have the Parkinson's Beats come join our conference last summer. Thank you so much for helping to organise that, Amanda. And I'd love a little opportunity to talk more about that piece of work, because I've seen it, folks, and it's very active. It's a whole body involvement, or you can do it seated, and there's lots of options with it. But it's another form of movement that I'd love to talk about.
So Beats really came from someone living with Parkinson's, and during the COVID period, where actually, and she's okay for me to share this. She had she'd had a heart condition which limited her ability to take part. So I didn't quite know where to go, and COVID had happened, so even more of those opportunities were now closed down. And she had came and asked, what can I do? And unfortunately, during that period as well, she had broken her ankle. So again, it was another limit to what she could do. But she knew she needed to be active to manage her Parkinson's, to help her feel better, have a quality of life, manage some of those symptoms. And she went along, I think, to a drum and taster, and then got so much from it, sort of mentally, and energised by it, that she just really saw the value of it. And that's really what we tried to create through Parkinson's Beats. She got some funding to test that in Elgin, and that session now runs twice a week, and people join across the UK and further afield, as well as from the local community, which is amazing. And it's a really simple activity, but the power of music to make you feel good, but also that bringing in those elements of rhythm, coordination, and then thinking about posture and flexibility and mobility. So that's kind of what we've kind of created with that. Since we've kind of last chatted, we've been taking Beats on a tour, or Joe certainly has been taking Beats on a tour, and has been really keen to make sure that, people who want this can get the opportunity to do it and try it. And I think obviously, like most things, it's much better when it's in person rather than online. And as a result of that, what we want to make sure is that the messages are not too diluted, although we want to make sure things are fun and accessible. We still need to make sure they're beneficial from a physical and mental point of view. So, drumming, which just means maybe moving your wrists, that's okay, but that's really not going to help Parkinson's. So we wanted to try and make sure that if we were to roll this out, can we really get some really good benefits from Parkinson's Beats by really working on those kind of challenging symptoms. And as a result of that, we delivered some training at the end of last year, which really brought Parkinson's and drumming together. Okay, how can we deliver this in a way that best suits people with Parkinson's? As a result of that, we've kind of trained various exercise instructors across different leisure trusts, but also a few volunteers as well, to bring Beats to people. Again, like you say, it could just be that stepping stone for, to do something else. It can even be about engaging people in a support group. We provide quite a lot of support groups across the country that bring people together to share their experiences and learn and hear from speakers, but that can be quite a daunting thing. So something like Beats can just, can open that door to people, as well as other physical activities. So yeah, that's something we're working on this year, is to take that across a few new sites, or even show people how they can do it at home. It's something that can easily be done at home. We're looking at some options to do, make that available online as well, or that people can join in as part of World Parkinson's Day on the 11th of April.
Lovely.
So as part of the virtual hub that the village that the RBS do. So yeah, I think it's a really invigorating, and one of the challenges, I think I touched on it earlier about symptoms. One symptom that people experience is that kind of masked face.
Yeah.
But I think when I go along to Parkinson's Beats, you can suddenly see people smiling. It's it's such I find that with quite a lot of the physical activities, people, really kind of relax, and some of that anxiety and masking, you can just see a little glimmer of how much they've enjoyed it, because that can be quite difficult to interpret it sometimes.
And I think, so I've heard it from like pastoral health walks, certainly in the dementia work that we've done in the past. A lot of things, especially obviously connected with physical activity, but especially music, anything that involved music or anything else, it connects with a very different part of our brain.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're not our condition necessarily. Like you said, we haven't come to a support group to sit in to talk to others about our condition or our symptoms or how we're feeling that day. We've come to drum, or we've come to tap our foot, or we've come to do a singing, or just listen. There's a lot of work in dementia with you're listening and reminiscing through music from different times. And I do think there's just a part of the brain that it connects with differently, and I'm sure that contributes to that change of face that you're perhaps seeing there, in that people are given a permission almost to not be their condition for that moment in time as well, which I think is really important.
It's funny, I remember we did a taster session last year. We had what we call YP event, so young people with Parkinson's. And we did a drumming taster, and I wasn't quite sure how it was going to go. So not all of it, but a lot of the time we deliver it seated. And, people, not to say people who are younger don't want to sit down and do exercise, but, we weren't quite sure how that was going to go. And this young guy with Parkinson's took part, and he got up at the end of the session and he just said, "That was the best fun I've ever had." Do you know? And that's what it's about, isn't it? It's when people really enjoy something and they really take away. That was quite moving, quite humbling to hear that.
Had that human connection to something. That's great. That's great that he could find that and that you guys could deliver that. Do you deliver work? Is it all across Scotland? Are there areas that you'd like to work in that you don't currently? Or
so I'm kind of working on a work programme that will have some kind of opportunity in every local authority area across Scotland, and I've been kind of working over that this is my 5th year now at Parkinson's UK. We haven't done very much work in the islands. We've done a bit of work in Orkney, and that's definitely a challenge. I suppose I've been quite lucky in that the people who I've worked with in terms of leisure and sports providers have been really open to working with us, and that makes our jobs easier because we're bought in together, and sometimes it's just it becomes the nature of the beast that you can't do everything all at one time as well. So it's been a gradual process. But certainly the islands, like you mentioned, the kind of rural areas, they're much more challenging in terms of getting people to activities, and we really need to consider how we do that, because it's not specialised exercise sessions, because they're not. There's not going to be enough people to make that worth being sustainable. It's definitely worth it, but from a sustainability point of view. So that's definitely something we need to consider. Do we work with other organisations and charities? Other conditions? Do we have, that kind of Parkinson's friendly model? So there's a few things that we're learning from some work in Orkney. But that's even in the kind of more rural areas of Scotland. This year we're looking to work over in Argyll and Bute, and it's that's definitely going to be challenging in itself.
And do people have to find you themselves, or is this something that they can connect with through their relationship with their GP or their care provider? Is it referral route in? Are there lots of different options?
Yeah, there is different options, but I think the key is making sure that this project won't work without the support of Parkinson's nurses and Parkinson's specialist physios, or a physio with a Parkinson's remit. They've definitely been the key ingredients to this, and I guess we'd be quite lucky in that I have some colleagues who work really closely with NHS staff. We have an excellence network, which is for people working with people with Parkinson's in the NHS. So we've got some good coverage, good visibility within the NHS, and that kind of helps build those partnerships. And certainly the model that I've taken is, to bring, NHS colleagues and their leisure partners together to go, okay, what do we need? What does it look like? How do we get people there? And making sure that the professionals from the NHS understand what's on offer, because, it's building their confidence, which is key to make sure we get, signposting or referrals through. So no, they're definitely the key ingredients. In some areas, it's a little bit more challenging because people don't always have specific workloads. It's very ad hoc that they would come across people with Parkinson's, but most places do have a Parkinson's nurse within the NHS board. Some people don't see their nurses very often, so it's making sure that all those channels are covered. But it has to be wider than that. Again, even from working with the physios across Scotland, a lot of physios unfortunately will see people when they have a fall. And at that point it's a little bit too late. It's not that exercise or physical activities not good. It's just that we wanted to make sure that we get that intervention in as early as possible. So we really want to be trying to target people at the point of diagnosis. So that's really why we need to have the nurses and the consultants on board with the physical activity message, and how we then translate that to, here's your local area, this is the services available, and how people can access them. I think that's a challenge in itself in Scotland because there's no one way for that. So, if you think about your health board, then it's got 3 or 5 local authorities in one area, and every area does things completely different. Sometimes I feel like I'm the little person in the box going, I know, can't really change that. But that's definitely a challenge for health professionals to link up. But having said that, we've just done some work down in Dumfries and Galloway with Chris Toppin and the team, and kind of linked in falls prevention with our work with exercise and physical activity provision. And I think just having, again, there's a nurse service there, but actually the physio service is seeing people a lot earlier. And if we can, if that happens, it really does make a difference. People are going to get much more benefit from the service.
Absolutely. I think that's what, with the Movement for Health work, we talk about prevention a lot, and movement and physical activity being, a real key to prevention.
Yeah.
But we don't just mean prevention as in it will prevent you getting X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
It will prevent certain things from happening or lessen your chances of certain things, such as falls. And it will also aid recovery from, the stronger we are, etc. So I think there's that dialogue to explore more of as well collectively, because I think there is a bit of a misunderstanding when it comes to risk and reward and movement, especially if you're living with complex conditions. There's a propensity potentially to go into very protective gatekeeper mode for individuals who are already, life is already really tough, and yet we're actually saying, well, no, actually, if you move more and do this certain thing and at this certain time, it will help X, Y, and Z. It's really helping those healthcare professionals to have that confidence, as you say, that that movement is the right thing to do and as early on as possible.
Yeah. And also how we educate, in our example, people with Parkinson's, that, they can challenge themselves. That's one of our key messages. Physical activity, based on the guidelines, we know that it can help manage some of the symptoms, can definitely support quality of life through that kind of mental and social aspect. But there's some emerging evidence that actually, at a higher intensity, physical activity can slow down the progression of the disease. Now, that research is tiny, but it's emerging, and there's more work that needs to be done around that. But I think the more people do that when they're able to do it, that's really important. We want to be, and we should all be doing that. We should never be doing a physical activity program that's the same week in, week out. We should be challenging ourselves for our own health, neurons in the brain for aging. We're all aging, unfortunately. So
speak for yourself, Amanda.
Yes, obviously, yes. I've aged a lot recently.
No.
But I think challenging people is quite hard. Quite a hard kind of education message to get across, and how we do that. But things like sport, I think, can really help with that. We've got we've been working on a few kind of tournaments or festivals with Table Tennis Scotland and Walking Football Scotland, which have been amazing for people to experience. I got a Parkinson's diagnosis. I went to start to play table tennis. I did it once a week, and then I participated in an international tournament and won a bronze medal. Do you know? Just the enthusiasm that gives someone, very humbling to hear that. And you don't need to win a medal, but being part of that process really does lift people.
Absolutely, and being allowed to celebrate stuff like that, that permissions piece. I think there's a lot of stigma around health conditions and living with health conditions that, you don't look unwell, you're happy. And things actually, no, you celebrate those wins, 100%. Thank you, Amanda. I wanted to ask about, we've talked about sport, and we've talked about some of the movements with beats, your Parkinson's beats work. And I wondered if there was other areas that Parkinson's UK is involved with in terms of dance or any in the creative arts or anything like that. I've heard rumblings, so that's why I'm asking.
One sport that we've maybe not touched on or activity is boxing. Again, these activities tend to be led by people with Parkinson's, so And I think that's got a good connotation because, it's about fighting Parkinson's, fighting fit. It feels like they're putting up something against what Parkinson's has thrown at them. So I think that's definitely an activity that we'll hopefully see more of in Scotland over the next year or so.
And is that something the organisation is looking at supporting more, or is it happening as part of the community, if you like?
Yeah. But a bit of both, to be honest, Emma. Certainly, UK colleagues have got some good contacts and kind of sport governing bodies around boxing, and where we kind of having hopeful that we might have kind of similar programmes or conversations to go forward this year. But there's been we've got a physical activity grants programme which we're just about to launch in a couple of weeks again, and there's a few providers who deliver boxing as part of that. So we're definitely seeing an increase and every time if I go out to a local group, they'll tell me when can we get boxing? Do you know,
Right.
we're doing boxing. So it is definitely something that the community want to see. But and again, using a similar model to, really raise awareness with those coaches and think about risk and how they support and adapt people, the activity for people with Parkinson's. But dance is an interesting one. We support Scottish Ballet with their Dance for Parkinson's sessions. So basically, this is actually an internationally renowned programme that they deliver. And they've trained various staff members across Scotland to deliver that. So it usually is a couple of dance instructors and volunteers support it, and usually they have a live musician, which again go back to that whole music chat that we had. That really does inspire people. It's costly, and and that's a difficulty from a sustainability point of view. But I know people really enjoy it and value it. Other types of dancing that we've, there's nothing off the radar with Parkinson's.
Everything's on the menu.
Yeah. And people find their own thing, but certainly something that we've looked at is how dance can engage people into an activity that's not traditional. Also things like singing, or the voice exercise as well. So bringing, I guess, some of those elements of the theatre together to support people with Parkinson's. We've not got anything specific happening in Scotland at the moment, but again, going back to the physical activity grant and what options there are for people, that's definitely something that we can explore.
Well, I look forward to hearing Amanda singing at our next conference. There you go. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today on the Movement for Health's Movement in Conversations podcast. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for all your support over however many years being of the Movement for Health Coalition now. And it's always a real treat to speak with you. So passionate about what you do, so knowledgeable as well. And thank you. And thank you as well for listening to today's podcast with Amanda from Parkinson's UK. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please check out the rest of the episodes in this series, where we've been speaking with members of the Movement for Health Coalition to understand a little bit more about how they support people to move more in Scotland. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.